please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about the continued suffering of the poor defenceless wee beer company known as Budlight, or as we Brits call it, literal piss water, because there are so many things better, and at this point, for something with a bit more punch to it, you may as well drink your own urine. I wouldn't give Budlight to my worst enemy. That's how crap it is. But then I also think whiskey's better. And if I don't like somebody, I'll give them a whiskey I'm not overly fond of that I still have in my collection. The point still stands. Budlight has been suffering. Now I'm going to take you back to the 7th of July. The reason for this is because I want to give you a rundown of what's happened since the start of this month up until yesterday. Because some things happen here and there, this also means we get to talk about Dylan Mulvaney, because there are many things that connect the two together. For obvious reasons, those rather fancy looking cans with Dylan's likeness on have caused a lot of damage. I had been wondering whether or not Dylan Mulvaney, since this all began, has had any paid promotional offers tabled, or whether any company wanting to get involved has been advised against it on the grounds that $20 billion lost in revenue is not something to be considered a positive. There are movie companies right now losing hundreds of millions, and they're still pushing the crap that people don't want. Cough cough, DCU, cough cough. You really should sell it off at this point, because you don't know how to make hero movies, Warner Brothers. So on the 7th of July 2023, it was officially declared that Budlight has fallen outside the top 10 favourite beers in America, according to a new survey. The survey is a YouGov poll, and it shows in America, Budlight is under Pabst Blue Ribbon, Miller, Corona Light. Corona does light? Oh no. Miller High Life? Oh, that's not good either. Coors, Stella Artois Beta, wife. Yep, Corona Extra, Modelo, Budweiser, Blue Moon, Samuel Adams, Heineken, Corona, and Guinness. A couple of those don't belong there. Guinness isn't really a beer, nor Stella for that matter. Stella Artois is what we call wife-beater juice. There are many of those on that list you can argue do and do not belong there. I think it should be the most popular whiskies in America that are not bourbon, sour mash, or rye. I'm not against them, just to be clear, but they are not whiskey. Anheuser-Busch has tanked more than $27 billion up to this point. Now that does not mean they're not making profit. That is profit they have lost. The total number of people asked in this poll was 1,468 people. Of course, that is not an indicator of an accurate poll where you really want at least 1% of a population to respond. However, to do that in a country the size of America would require at least 3 million. It's a bit much. And you're unlikely to get that many people willingly responding, and it's quite expensive to do. So for the sake of it, to be in that joint position with Pabst Blue Ribbon, Miller Genuine Draft, and Miller Lite at 42%, yeah, isn't the worst thing in the world, right? Sure. It should be noted based on sales, Guinness is not number one, right? Nor is Corona or Heineken. No. In America, Modelo, Youngling, and a couple others who have been rising up. Budlight plummeting. It should also be additionally pointed out, one of those is owned by the other one's parent company, a point that has been raised many times because Anheuser-Busch, while losing lots of money on Budlight, aren't necessarily losing it in other departments where other beers they own are filling the gap. The problem they have really is Budlight is so main staple. To lose that means they lose a corner of a market where they hold a considerable percentage. Not necessarily a monopoly, but we are talking about America here. The article in question that I've linked down below that covers this part also included a video of Dylan Mulvaney addressing this, the loss, the fallout, for the first time. And I thought I'd play a short clip of that now.
Hi. One thing I will not tolerate people saying about me is that I don't like beer, because I love beer and I always have. What I'm about to tell you might sound like old news, but you know that feeling when you have something uncomfy like sitting on your chest? well, that's how I feel right now. So this feels like the right thing to do. I took a brand deal with a company that I loved, and I posted a sponsored video to my page. And it must have been a slow news week, because the way that this ad got blown up, you would have thought I was like on a billboard or on a TV commercial or something major. But no, it was just an Instagram video. And the wildest part is that they also sent me one can with my face on it. And funny story, I had the can around my house, but then I realized, wait, I need to protect this can. So I hid it somewhere, and now I can't find it because I hid it so well. But when I do find it, I feel like it needs to go in a museum, preferably behind bulletproof glass. And you might be thinking, Dylan, why bring it up now? I'm bringing it up because what transpired from that video was more bullying and transphobia than I could have ever imagined.
What's interesting to me is, much like Anheuser-Busch, or Bud Light more notably, Dylan Mulvaney has employed the tactic, which is in the title, of keep calm and carry on. In retrospect, it's the right tactic, for Dylan that is, because there's not much Dylan can do beyond take all the criticism aimed at Dylan for partaking in this from people who do not agree with many things Dylan does, says, believes, espouses, or the fact that a company like Anheuser-Busch have, according to a lot of people who have boycotted Bud Light, enabled the behaviour of that of Dylan Mulvaney. Now, I mentioned keep calm and carry on being employed by both Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney. On the 18th of July, Bud Light's social media accounts are being slammed with, it says here, abuse. Well, we'll look into that in a moment. After resuming regular posting since the backlash. Quote, I'd rather drink urine. Now that seems interesting because I mentioned it earlier. I didn't realize my earlier comment was a form of foreshadowing. The regular resuming programming of Bud Light on social media began on June the 22nd. It was cautious, there weren't many tweets at first. They have taken what appears to be a more politically neutral stance and have offered faceless adverts on social media accounts, no doubt to avoid having anyone that is promoting their product, whether they be a paid actor or not, or a social media influencer, getting less backlash in turn. So let's take, for example, it's Saturday, let's have a good day. Okay, reply. Once again, no faces. This should tell you something, and still, nope. Along with, I'd rather drink urine. I didn't realize there was actual tweets for that. The problem I highlighted in a previous video, in fact I've highlighted since this all began, is that for companies like Anheuser-Busch, for Bud Light, the problem they are going to have going forward is either they appeal to their larger mass that have walked away and try and get them to come back, which in turn may well help the more independent stockists who in turn are trying to sell Bud Light knowing they can't, right? Creatures of habit usually do invariably flock back to what they know. Or do they try and appeal to those who weren't really interested in their product in the first place, drawing a political line with a beer, which is what often happens when companies that are considered going woke suffer a huge financial loss for it. It's called going broke. Whether that's the case for Bud Light or not, I couldn't really care less, because again, whiskey is better. But it is worth highlighting here. Bud Light are trying to carry on when the court of public opinion has assigned guilt in perpetuity. They are guilty of getting involved in something. They really shouldn't. I get wanting to use your platform to promote something you have deemed good. I can fully understand that. But when your core audience don't agree with you, you are trying to, or seem to be trying to, according to those who now are boycotting you, manipulating them into believing something they do not want to share the belief in, right? Does that make sense, or is that too convoluted? It makes sense in my head, okay? I might not be the best at articulating this perspective of how it could be seen, or how I see it from an outsider's perspective. If one of my favorite whiskey companies did this, I'm sure I'll be raging about it. Don't worry. And yes, I'm very much aware Johnny Walker's getting involved in some identity politics. It's quite sad. As many of you know, Disney have been getting involved in the live-action remakes, and most of them have been universally panned by social media, especially social media, because of race swapping mostly, the casting not being true to the original source material, and then much argumentation, usually centering around people being racist for daring to point these discrepancies out. Disney are currently working on Snow White and the Seven Companions. It would have been dwarves, but a certain dwarf of note decided to take the ladder out from underneath everyone else because he's a dickhead. There were others involved, but Mr. Peter Dinklage did not help the situation. A picture was doing its rounds of allegedly Snow White and her 7 companions. Much backlash for that. Let's not forget here though, a lot of these live-action remakes still make huge amounts of profit, regardless. For example, Aladdin made over $1 billion and they changed the story. Snow White is alleged to be deviating from the 1937 version of the film, which has led to articles doing their rounds simply saying that Snow White, Disney's Snow White, faces a woke Budlight style backlash. I don't know if this is true or not. A lot of the criticism from social media, regardless of them being right-wing or not, is centered around the fact that everything about everything produced has to be race-swapped in some way, to generate a form of parity of esteem by including everyone under the guise of the word diversity. But because things like that are pushed down your throat, the viewer, the casual, those that they want to go and watch the movie in the first place, it comes across as very shallow, as opposed to the story it was originally meant to be. But they desperately want to make a Snow White movie because Snow White is a very popular character, or the movie itself is. Especially the cartoon one we all grew up with, that stuff was funny. I just wanted to introduce this before we move on to Budlight getting additional criticism for an NFL message. So Budlight tweeted, "Only 8 Sundays till at NFL, but who's counting? ... The backlash to this was instantaneous. For example, an apology would have gone a long way, Budweiser, but it's way too late now. Another, thank you Budlight marketing team. You give my life meaning by coming by your account and trashing you. And really, Budweiser and Budlight will spend millions on NFL commercials like it's business as usual, with 0 commercials addressing the issue. I said before that like the person whose only tool is a hammer seeing every problem as a nail, ABC's marketing as the solution to every issue. But this is ridiculous. Go ahead and spend the money while we laugh, but it's getting to the point of foolishness. Hashtag go woke, go broke." One last one. It's been almost 4 months since Budlight destroyed their brand. But who's counting? Now some have come to the defense of Budlight. I take a very couldn't care less stance. Mostly because I no longer see the point in punishing them. You can tell where their mentality is. Their sales are down nearly 30%. They've taken a massive knock, but they're still selling huge amounts. If they have to rebuild from that, they'll rebuild from that. Modelo being number 1 doesn't mean much, considering who owns Modelo. So as long as people are still buying Anheuser-Busch products, even if they are absolute shite, it doesn't really matter to them. They will claw back that money and invest it in the future by learning their lesson. But I will admit, it's funny to see how much damage can be done, because in the court of public opinion, once you've been tarred and feathered, it is very hard to get that tar, all those feathers, off of you. And in the case of Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light, Bud Shite, there isn't really much of a path forward beyond continuing to make money and hoping things improve, given enough time. And that does invariably happen. Attrition, I guess, is the correct word to describe it. It will be that way for some time, before Bud Light invariably make the same mistake twice. Because many of these companies do, because they really do want to push those messages. The final article concerns Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney is a nominee for a Streamy Award 2023. Not even a joke. Now this intrigues me. It intrigues me because I didn't realise shite awards like this even existed. And it's even funnier when you think, surely you wouldn't want to, for the sake of optics, to have anyone that could be a little problematic, money-wise, present. But apparently, Dylan Mulvaney will be competing for a Streamy Award. And I assume they'll win, even though it's not until August the 27th. I can't wait for that. I really can't. I'm so excited.